What's up guys, Daveminator122, and today's a bit of a different video for you guys. It's going to be kind of a deck building video. It's a two-part video with my buddy Marion over at ScreenCasterZ, which you can watch his part here. After you've watched mine, of course. This is a two-parter about deck building and getting card advantage, namely via draw power. Card advantage is a very interesting concept, and it's actually something I'd like to start off with before I start talking about specific cards. For the younger players, or even just beginning players, no matter how old you are when you start, advantage is an interesting concept that a lot of players talk about but never really explain what they mean, especially when you're looking at deck profiles online on Yu-Gi-Tubers and things like that. When a Yu-Gi-Oh player is referring to advantage, they are talking about how many cards you control as compared to how many cards your opponent controls. It's an extremely simple explanation of it. Why do we even care? Well, and all the advanced players are going to get so mad at me for this one, if you have more cards than your opponent, you are probably winning. Probably. Now, there's weird exceptions to this rule. If you have a hand of 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons and nothing on your field and no means to play any of them, and your opponent has 1 Vanity's Emptiness, yeah, they're winning right now because their card is more useful than yours, even though you have 2 more than they do. But in generally speaking, if you control more cards in your hand and on the field combined, you're probably winning. And when talking about advantage specifically, it kind of gets boiled down into what would be very simple arithmetic, subtraction and addition. When talking about cards like, for instance, Pot of Greed, people say, well, this card is a +1. What does that even mean? Well, it means it's a +1 because it nets you 1 extra card. Sure, the card text says, draw 2 cards, but you had to use Pot of Greed, which means that you are using 1 card from your hand that goes to the graveyard after resolution to get you 2 cards. So you used 1 to get 2, which means it's -1 plus 2, you've netted 1. +1. But drawing cards and getting cards is not necessarily the only way you get advantage. The other way, obviously, is to make your opponent lose advantage. Something like Regeki destroying 5 of your opponent's monsters, you used 1 card and they lost 5, which netted you +4. And then there's some hooey you can do with set MSTs and things like that, but we're basically going to be talking about draw power in this one, because when building a deck, draw power is your most readily accountable and tangible amount of advantage the deck actually shows, because you don't quite know what you're going to be playing against in theory, and you don't really know what your opponent's going to be doing, so you really can't rely on your opponent to do stuff. But when you're deck building, draw power cards are a great way to ensure that your deck has some tangible means of acquiring advantage. Now, Marion and I are actually going to split the most important cards of the format between our 2 videos so that I don't talk about all the good ones and he talks about crap. So some of the cards I'm going to be talking about are a little less relevant, but still, it'd be interesting to consider when building in a deck. The first one I want to talk about is Jar of Avarice, a very interesting trap card that takes after its spell variant that's actually on the ban list currently. Basically what it does is when you activate this card, you can spin 5 cards from your graveyard back to your deck, and then once you do that, draw 1 card. This card would be considered probably a +0. It doesn't net you any advantage, it's 1 card for 1. It's not the fastest draw card we have, but the fact that it spins 5 cards back to your deck actually does have some utility when deck building. If you find that your deck has a hard time maintaining resources, as in you're just milling through your deck, or you just have 1 or 2 really powerful spells that are required for the deck to work, and once you use them, then the deck is, if it didn't win, then you're done, or you're playing something trolly like Exodia, it really helps to put important cards back in your deck so that you can get to them later, because sometimes decks have a very hard time getting cards out of the grave, but don't have as much of a hard time getting them out of the deck. In that case, this card is actually very useful, and you might consider it, even though it is a trap, which makes it a little slow. The next card I want to talk about is Patrick Hoban's favorite card, Upstart Goblin. Ooh, boo! Upstart Goblin is a very interesting card, and it's kind of a heated debate card on how it actually functions, but it's still one of the more relevant draw cards we have, even though it just got recently put on the limited list to 1. What does it do? You draw 1 card. You give your opponent 1,000 life points, but that most of the time doesn't quite matter. Unless you're playing a burn deck like Nurse Burn, and then you're actually hitting your opponent for 1,000 damage, and that's just super trolling. Any deck can run Upstart Goblin, as long as that deck is 40 cards. Any more, you're running into the problem where you just would have drawn the card you would have drawn with this if you just simply didn't run this. So don't do this card in a deck over 40. Some people say, oh, you can run it in a deck over 40. No, you're stupid. Stop. That makes literally mathematically no sense. Don't do that. Now, back to advantage. So with Upstart Goblin, you're not really necessarily getting any advantage, you're just playing a statistics game. Probability, if you will. You're gambling a little more efficiently when you're drawing 1 random card out of your deck. Because technically, it's easier to draw a card 1 in 39 than it is 1 in 40. Like I said, when it was put to 1, it kind of made its relevance a little silly, because when you're only putting 1 Upstart Goblin in a deck, it's like, oh, well, I could have put a Regeki in instead, and that card's more useful readily. So, any deck can play it as a boost to another draw engine, if you will. The next card I want to talk about is not quite as relevant as Upstart Goblin, but it's one of my favorite draw cards, Supply Squad, a continuous spell. Whenever one of your monsters will be destroyed once per turn, draw 1 card. Now, it doesn't draw you a card for every monster killed, and it only does it the first time a monster is killed. However, it does it anytime a monster is killed for infinite amount of turns because it is a continuous spell. Cool thing about Supply Squad is it does have very niche uses, but the niche uses that it have, it's very useful. The decks that want to play Supply Squad tend to be things like Yang Zing, Cosmos, or Battery Man, which like to nuke their own board to get advantage anyway, and then just pick up an extra card at the end of the whole thing. Now, most Cosmo players will play Allure of Darkness instead, but I was talking about this card a couple videos ago, and it actually does work very well when you use your Fire King Island on your Cosmo thing, but the deck that you're probably playing this in is Yang Zing. Yang Zing like to suicide themselves all the time because when one of them dies, it summons another out of the deck, so you might as well draw a card while you ram a monster into something, or you dark hole yourself, or whatever stupid, seemingly ridiculous play you're going to make, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that you're killing your own crap, you're getting extra cards for it. And like I said earlier, the more cards, the better. Oh boy, we got a new one on the list. Pot of Cupidity. Oh, this stupid card. Pot of Stupidity, more like it. Oh my god, this card is dumb. But it is new, and so therefore very relevant, and it's the closest thing we have to banned-ass Pot of Greed. It has the same effect as Pot of Greed. Draw 2 cards. That's great. It's an inherent +1. It's one of the easiest +1s in the game, except its activation condition is you need to banish the top 10 cards of your deck face down, which pretty much means that that's 10 cards you can no longer use in the duel ever, because you really can't get face down banished cards back into play by any means except, like, I don't know, Necroface. So in this instance, you are sacrificing the consistency of your deck for the potential consistency boost of getting a +1. The OTG was running this card to some success by playing decks over 40 cards and just playing 3 copies of every important card, so that way if you accidentally mill banish one of the ones you need, you can happily draw into one of the other copies. It totally throws traditional deck building out the window. If you took this and put it into a 40 card deck, you're going to find that you're milling yourself out really, really quick, so you tend to play this in decks that are over 40 cards. It technically makes deck building easy. You can just go click, 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 and just do 3 copies of everything you need, and just doesn't, who cares how many cards you have as long as it's under the max amount of 60. So it changes deck building. It's an interesting card, and it'll be cool to see what the TCG does with it. A lot of people hate this card, but it does work. That's the important thing. It does work. Even if you are milling your entire deck, it is a +1. And sometimes a top deck of this is great. Who cares if you were going to mill your 10 cards? You were going to lose anyway, so you might as well get 2 cards and try to come around. Pot of Cupidity. And the last card I want to talk about is Maxie, one of the more interesting draw cards that we have at our disposal. It's a monster, which is odd because every other draw card in the game is pretty much spells and traps. And it's also a hand trap, which means it's actually very hard to stop. The turn that you send this card from your hand to the graveyard, anytime your opponent would special summon a monster, you get to draw a card for every one they do. Which means it's not just draw a card when they special summon, it's draw a card every time. This thing is very useful when trained to things like Call of the Haunted, where you know they're going to special summon. It's a little hard to use against something like Blackluster Soldier, which is an inherent special summon, and your opponent doesn't really telegraph it or activate any effects to use it. Against non-inherent special summons, Maxie is a great little floodgate. And that's why it's different. It's a floodgate. Most people don't take the Maxie challenge, which means that, oh, I'm under Maxie right now, but I'm Synchron's. I'm still going to go off and make them draw 20 cards because I'm going to hope the board I can build, unfettered, is going to be able to lock out 20 cards in the hand. And sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. And that is the determination as you, as the opponent against Maxie, needs to make. So it's not necessarily a draw card in the sense that it'll net you any real advantage. Most of the time, at best, it's even or +1. You maybe chain it to instant fusion, and you get the Norden draw, and then you get what he makes draw, and that's a good little +1. And if he stops there, your opponent's fine. But, you know, they did just use Norden. They're probably going to make something else. They're probably going to overlay for an XYZ. So you might get the +2. You might get it. You might just grab it. So Maxie is very interesting. It relies on your opponent to do things to get you extra cards. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because if your opponent simply just sets some back row and passes, and then you just blow over them next turn because they were under Maxie and were too afraid to go off, hey, you won the duel. It doesn't matter you didn't get your extra cards to go into Wombo combo number 35. Who cares? You still won the duel. Who cares? So Maxie is one of the more interesting cards we have at our disposal because it's more of a floodgate than a draw card. Unless your opponent's playing Synchrons, then it's a draw card. Ooh boy, is it a draw card. So, in closing, pretty much any deck can play Maxie. But anyway guys, that was my quick overview of the different draw cards we have at our disposal. Make sure you go to check out Marion's channel for the other half of the list. He's got some more interesting, more devious kind of draw power card, card of demise, that he wants to talk about. So check out his video, like give him a like, comment, and subscribe to his channel because, you know, I'm doing him a favor because I'm the big hubbub to do. Not really, I'm still not over 10K, I can't. But anyway guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. A very interesting, more different kind of video. I've been wanting to talk about this for some time actually, because whenever I'm building a deck, I'm like, oh, I need a draw card, but all the draw cards suck. Anyway guys, let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and remember guys, if you don't control the meta, who will? I'll see you guys next time.
It doesn't matter how strong your deck can be, it means nothing if you can't do anything with it.
Also true. The Galaxy deck has a lot of inconsistencies. Opening up a bad hand is near impossible to play out of. Since they play a mix of level 5s and 8s, lopsided hands are practically a given.